emerging technologies librarian. Okay. So my specialty, I kind of speak around the country on multimodal technology and incorporating assessment and multimodal learning into our regular curriculums. I also manage the digital media studio in the library. Has anybody been to the digital media studio? Because your students are going there, so you should go check it out. Okay, cool. So the digital media studio is a place on campus where, regardless of your skill level, you can come and work with media-rich technology. So it's not for the expert on campus who already has their own specialty lab. It's for the major that may not ever get exposed to multimedia technology in the course of their curriculum, but they will need it when they go into the workplace. I tell students all the time, if you don't know how to use Mac, that's a problem. You get your first job and there are Macs in there, your employer is not going to switch out to PC because you don't have any experience with Mac. And we don't, as faculty, have time to teach students a lot of these peripheral skills that they're going to need when they get into the workplace. So that's what the Digital Media Studio is for. And so it's a really good partner for you, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those partnership opportunities. So I know that people get nervous when we talk about assessments and when we talk about multimodal. So I wanted to put something on here that would make you feel at ease. So it's like the laughter of children and kittens. So you just relax. It would be painless and wonderful. So I've done this in the Google Doc and in a couple other formats, so we can share this later. But I would start by, let's just define multimodal for our conversation. So I stole this from Shannon Matter, who has a wonderful blog on this, and I've shared all these resources for you, and I'll email to you, so don't feel like you have to write any of this down. But so multimodal student work, in the context that we're going to talk about it today, is something that's theoretically informed, research-driven, and results in something other than a traditional paper. So it's not a, let's go just make a movie, okay? There's research behind it. They do work for it. There's theory behind it that you have, of course, given them, bestowed upon them, okay? So that's what we talk about when we talk about multimodal. How many of you are doing multimodal right now in your classrooms? Great. What kind of stuff are you doing?
They're working on visual profiles right now.
Okay.
Research organization and create a profile.
Okay. So you're like, what's your composition English?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you do?
We do good presentations. Students do presentations.
Okay. And you have them do presentations in what format?
Well, so they work in groups, and they do an outside project, come back in. So basically, they'll do like a PowerPoint, and then they'll sometimes have a demonstration they do in front of their peers.
Okay. And what are your
Physics.
disciplines? Physics. Okay. Fine. Anybody else doing multimodal?
Well, kind of the wild card because we're electronic media communications.
Right.
This
So
is what we do.
it's not a nature piece. Right. So for you, it would be writing a paper. So are you having anybody write papers? To branch out? I'm just so how many of you, if you had to do a self-assessment, would feel like you're pretty conversant with multimodal technologies? You're all in no. I have no idea how to do it. So your PowerPoint and your paper and pen and your word processing and maybe one other thing thrown in. Right? Is that about your comfort level? It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I just need to know so I know where to go when I'm talking to y'all. If you're all like experts, then we're going to change things up. Okay, that's cool. That's fine. That's pretty typical. Whenever I teach a class, because we're in the library, I get a nice cross-section. And I always say to students, how many of your professors teach solely by PowerPoint? When I started here at MTSU, every hand went up. Now when I ask that question, as I ask it every class, I'd say there's maybe 10% of the class raised their hand. But that's encouraging to me, that not everybody is teaching by PowerPoint. And then I say to them, how many of you go home at night and create PowerPoints to send to your friends? And they all laugh hysterically, right? Because nobody uses PowerPoint outside the context of the classroom. And that's okay. I mean, some people use it in the workplace. That's changing too, though. But if we have an opportunity to have them use a tool that they'll use somewhere else, then it's a double bonus, right? They're actually learning a skill they'll use in the workplace in addition to giving you the assessment that you need. So, as faculty, and I think this is really the crux of what we're going to talk about today. We frame our world around the relationship between instruction and assessment. It is who we are. It is how we're made. We instruct, we assess. We instruct, we assess. What are the other options? We cannot go there today, okay? But that is really, that linkage is important to us and who we are and our identity. So when we start talking about changing the way we assess, people immediately start thinking they're going to have to change the way that they teach. And then there starts to be some anxiety because I don't know how to do all this other stuff, or I don't have time to learn it, or we need to get state of the core, and then there's they call them the alphabeters. It's a little bit derogative, but so the alphabeters who think that everything should be print, and then the experimenters who think everything should be other. So, but you can still maintain your core instruction while providing new opportunities for assessment. And that's how I'm going to talk about today. Kittens, right? And you have heard the president talk about this, relevance. It's all about relevance because we know now that relevance is tied to retention. Retention is tied to employment. So everybody cares about relevance right now. But even more important than that, relevance is tied to the meaning of what it is that we do, right? So we want what we do to be relevant to our students, otherwise why are we getting up in the morning, right? So if our assessments can be more relevant, then that means that they will stay with the student longer and the impact of what we do will move more. So far nobody's disagreeing with me, so I'm moving forward. Likewise, the world's increasingly digital. How we interact with the world is more visual, it's more temporal, and it's fundamentally changing. Now, here's where I can take a quick time out. If anyone disagrees that those statements are true, I'll be happy to talk about that. Because I think that's important that we all need to be on the same page with that. We know that how we learn and how we interact with each other is changing. How many of you would have those friends that it's easier to text them than to call them, because it's just faster, right? How many of you are like, if you look at an email and you have to scroll down, you're like, oh, I can't read this right now, right? We're standing in front of the microwave, 60 seconds, I don't have time for this, right? How we interact with the universe and how we communicate with each other, it's changed. It's done changed, it's not going back, okay? So how we think and communicate in the classroom has to change too. We should at least try, I think. So we know how we have these three issues. We are tied to assessment and instruction. We know that how we communicate is changing, and it's in part because of our digital lifestyles. And we know that we need to be relevant. So we have these three balls in the air, okay? And so how do we incorporate the reality of our students into our assessments to make it all relevant? So how do we throw it all together and make it work? So multimodal is just one example. It is not the end all, and I would never say that it is. But it is a reality, and it is an integral part of our students' hopefully future work lives. And you can see it's part of your work life now too, right? We have people on iPads, we have people on their smartphones texting. We may take notes with them later, we'll type them up, right? I'm going to send you the link to this. I'm not going to hand you out a piece of paper. It's changing how we communicate too. So this synthesis, people get anxious because they say, English professors are most famous for this, not to disparage English professors, but they say composition is an act of creativity. Composition is the synthesis of idea and thought. It takes us beyond, just simple writing an essay, composing something. And we have that sort of example of higher thinking in every discipline, right? We used to teach just simple addition and subtraction at this level. Now we're at this level, and we're into the art of math, if you will. Or we're into the art of science and physics, which, that's the whole thing, right? So we get to this stage of learning where we're talking about creative thinking and synthesis. And if we stop teaching that, then do they stop learning that? Because we're tied to that model of instruction, assessment, instruction, assessment, instruction, assessment. Okay? But it's not. Because just like teaching cursive creates higher levels of thinking, and composition is a form of intelligence making, so is creating multimodal projects. It is. I don't think that's a huge leap for us to make. So it is a form of intelligence making. when they create in multimodal forms. But you have to provide the scaffolding. So, concerns that faculty have is that multimodal projects can be incredibly subjective. Do you feel that way? Okay, I always think that that's kind of funny because written papers can be pretty subjective too. You all have just been trained and used to that now. For me, I find reading a written essay to be much more difficult than evaluating a multimodal because I've always taught in multimodal. It's out of your scope of comfort. You teach X. You don't teach electronic, movie making. So now you're asking, you're trying to assess on something you didn't teach. And it works like this, instruction, assessment, instruction, assessment. So you're feeling like it's going backwards, okay? You're just not comfortable. You're just not comfortable with that technology and teaching to that technology. You're asking students to use technology that you don't know how to use. This is the number one problem that students in the digital media studio, we do a survey every semester and we ask them for feedback. This is the number one thing they complain about. My professors only assign software that they know. And that is a huge problem. Because you actually shouldn't care what software they do it on. You should only care what the end result is. You should only care if it comes out in print, not whether it was done on Word or Pages or OpenOffice. You should only care that it ends up in a PDF, not how it was built. You should only care that it's in an MP3 format, not what software was built on. When you start to legislate what software they use, you extremely limit students for a couple of reasons. One, some software is very expensive and not every student has access to it. Some software is complicated and not every student knows how to do it. Some software limits a student's creativity. They can do a lot more if they had the options and the opportunity. So in the Digital Media Studio, for example, we have commercial software, which is Mac and PC, but we also have open source software because we want our students to be good digital citizens and they need to understand that the world is not a commercial product, that there are other options available. And open source is free, so that students who can't afford Windows, which by the way is incredibly expensive, or Mac, which is stratospheric if you're paying for it yourself, right? This is an option for them. But if you tell them that they have to create this in Photoshop, they're locked down. And the only reason you might be saying that, or faculty might be saying that, is that they only know Photoshop. That's a limitation on your end, not on the student's end. So instead of assigning projects by software, assign them by end game. I want something that can be emailed. I want something that can be viewed in Dropbox. I want something that can be viewed on a PC. Like, tell them what the specs are that you need and let them choose what software package. And then they can come to the DMS and say, here's my assignment. In fact, we have faculty send us their assignments, and we keep them in a notebook up there. And then we open them up and say, okay, this is the specs. Here are the 6 programs you can use that will meet this criteria, from easy to hard. And then they choose which one works best. That's a nice way that we can collaborate together on that. And it gives students the opportunity to learn that there's more out there than the tiny lens that we're showing them. So that's the number one complaint we get from our students, is that the scope of what they're assigned is very limited. Only Photoshop, only iMovie, only Word, whatever. Okay. So the last thing that concerns that faculty have is that it takes too much time. This multimodal stuff takes too much time. Well, I'm not going to lie. It does take a lot of time. The first time. Just like the first time back in the day when you did your first round of assignments, right? And then you kind of, every year you tweak them and use them again, right? So the first time it does take a lot of time, but after that, not so much. So the key is to understand for you, what is the goal that you want to teach? Not what is it that you want them, what the assessment needs to be. That doesn't really matter. The goal is, what is it that you want them to tell you? What is it that you want them to learn? Is the goal for them to just repeat back what you learned? Sometimes that's important. Okay. Is the goal that you want them to see how they synthesize complex concepts? Is the goal that you want them to add on or expand or explore. I mean, what is the goal of the assessment? Once you know what your goal is, then you can choose the proper tool. Sometimes it will be a paper. Sometimes it won't. Okay, so I'm going to take a little detour really quick here, and I'm going to show you guys something. How many of you know what your students know, like who they are right now? I know that's kind of a strange question. I'll give you an example of the world that they live in really quick before we dive into this. So Google Images launched in 2001. There were 250 million images. By 2005, it was over 1 billion. 2010, it was 10 billion. We're up to 15 billion now in 2012. Images, 15 billion images. How many of you are on Facebook? Okay, so did you remember when Facebook, like 3 years ago, you would get pictures all the time? Okay, now you get pictures of words. People put up little EE cards, or they take pictures of something they've written, right? They turn their written into a visual on Facebook. That's a great example of that kind of switch towards a visual sort of movement. Even though there are still words involved, that's actually a picture, right? Instagram was created in 2011. There were 14 million accounts in the first year. 14 million, images, accounts in the first year. Instagram now has more accounts than MySpace ever did. 100 billion is the number of photos in Facebook. 100 billion with a B. That number is so big, I can't even conceptualize it. And if everybody on Earth got to play back all the YouTube videos, we'd each get 140 of our own. 140 LOL cats. And 48 hours is the amount of YouTube video uploaded every minute. We are a visual, auditory, visual world. And the number of videos viewed online, 201.4 billion. Take out porn, comes down to 88.3 billion. Well, porn takes up a huge, porn runs the internet, I mean, they do. So the way that we interact and consume is changing, and I already told you about this a little bit. So the way that we talk to each other, the way that we work with each other is changing. My favorite. I love that one. So, we started with a simple tool. That simple tool still works, but now we use more advanced tools. So because we interact differently, because we consume differently, we know now the way we learn is different. So that means the way we teach has to change, how we teach has to change. Oh, no, that's not right either. Hey, we're all locked up. Woo! Don't look. Okay. And what we teach has to change. So we're not going to focus on what we're teaching today. I'm going to leave that to you. That's not what this is about. But I am going to just want to show you, wait, seriously? Very briefly, maybe briefly. There we are. This is your students. Okay. This is the student that is in your classroom. And actually, it's us too. Let's not kid ourselves. So we do shallow, superficial learning, right? We know that that's how we learn now. We're hummingbirds. We go from subject to subject. We come back later. Once we know where it is, we can come back later and research it if we need to. We're not the woodpecker anymore. Just hammer away at that. I mean, this is how y'all probably work on the internet, right? You're hummingbirds. You kind of jump from thing to thing. You get a journal now. How many of you sit down and read the journal cover to cover? Right. Nobody does that anymore, right? We're like, okay, I know where this is. This might be of interest to me later. If I need to know about this topic, I'll come back to it. Okay? Now, there are times when we are woodpeckers about things, and that's okay, but for the most part, we're hummingbirds. We are skimmers, and our students are skimmers. And those of you who have reading, and you know that this is a big issue. We just don't have time. They don't have time, okay? So they're skimmers, and they have hyperattention. You all know this, right? getting them to focus on you, you know, it's almost. They think they're multitasking. We think we multitask, okay? But biologically, it's not possible. We don't multitask. We just do lots of things very poorly, all at the same time, okay? Students think they multitask. They don't, okay? And they're very multimodal. They communicate with each other in ways that are digital. They send pictures to each other. They modify each other's videos. They modify other people's videos. There's some copyright and ethical issues there, but, and they feel like that's okay. They're very nonlinear. You've probably all experienced this, right? Okay? That doesn't mean they don't get it. It just means they're not a bullet point kind of group. And they are self-taught, and this is a huge, huge problem for you. And it's going to be a big, I'm going to predict right now, I'm going on record because it's being recorded. In education, this is going to be the biggest problem that's going to face us in a decade. And here's what I mean by self-taught. These kids that are in school right now did not have parents who were particularly computer savvy. So when they learned the computer and the internet, they taught themselves. They asked each other. Okay? They were in school when typing classes were just phasing out. So they were in the donut hole between when we used to talk about typing and computers and to when we just assumed kids all knew about computers. So they use them now. My kindergartner uses an iPad in his classroom, but they don't get instruction on how to use the iPad because everyone just assumes they know. And personally, I think it's nobody wants to admit that they don't know. So they just assume when the kids don't know, let them do it. So these kids are all self-taught. They have bad habits. They have very bad habits. We all have very bad habits, right? How many of you sat with somebody else and you just want to just claw their eyes out when you watch them work on the computer? Because you're like, that's not how I do that. Don't use the mouse, use the buttons. Don't use the buttons, use the mouse. Don't do the pull down, right? You know what I'm talking about, like sitting with your parents. It's like, we're all self-taught, and we're self-taught pretty poorly. And it's not just simple things like how to actually use the hardware. We're self-taught software too. So we have poor typing skills, okay, and which is a problem. We know very limited software, and the software that we do know, we know very small portions of it because we don't read the entire manual. Who's ever read a software manual in their life? Yeah, we give you a prize if you have because it's just not done, right? We learn what we need to learn on it to move on. You know, Microsoft built 6 levels of redundancy into every program that they build. So there are 6 ways to cut in Word. And we all probably do all 6. But does anyone know all 6 besides me? Because that's my job. But I didn't know that until I went to a class on it. Okay. So software companies know that you don't learn and maximize. Now, if you're if you're an avid editor, you may spend your whole career learning how to use one piece of technology. Then you get into the workforce and nobody uses it anymore. But that's a whole other story. But so they're self-taught and they're self-taught poorly. You're assuming they know, and they're assuming they know more than they may know. So we're going, let's go multimodal. But a third of your kids may not even know how to do the basics. Half of them think they know how to do more than they really do. And the rest of them may be proficient at it, but then they need help in something else. So it does add another layer of complexity to your job. There's no joke about that. That's why saying to somebody, use the program that works for you is a good sort of fix for that. Because there are all kinds of levels of programs out there to get the job done. Everything from simple PowerPoint to very complex Adobe Premiere, okay? So that's your student. I don't think there's anything else here that I want to show you right now. So now, hey, go back. I'm going to open this for you. Really? So Google Presentations is irritating me today. There we go. See, now I probably did this 10 different ways and somebody else would have done it. All right, so this is a really cool program that's at Kent State. And Kent State has a big push for multimodal student work. And I like their top 3 tips here. Eat your own dog food. So if you're going to assign a program, at least be familiar with the basics of it. or don't assign that program and let them choose whatever they want. Okay? So you know pencil and pen, right? So you don't have any problem. Back in the day when you said write a paper, it wasn't like anyone was going to come to you and be like, I'm sorry, what does the pen do? Right? So that was never another level there. But now, you know, if you want someone to do a short movie, you make a short movie. It doesn't matter what program you do it on. It's the synthesis, the act of creating is what you need to experience before you assign it. And Paula and others can help you with that if you don't know how to do it. Okay? The other thing is, how many of you do formative assessment? And you probably all do both, right? Formative and summative assessment is great. So you're going to have to do a lot more formative and a lot less summative assessments. Because this act of multimodal creation is a process. And you need to be able to check in with them along that road. So you're going to have to be checking in and doing your assessment as you go. That helps them and helps you. And then the other thing is provide for them a rubric, which I'm going to talk to you about in great detail today. But and I will give you the access to this. But provide them a rubric so that they know what it is you expect from them to do. Otherwise, it's overwhelming to do that. And then you're going to have to take time to do some good planning, which you all knew that already. But so now we're going to talk about some rubrics. If I can get back to my actual, there we are. All right, so a lot of the stuff that you already use as a rubric can be transferred over to a multimodal assignment. Purpose, audience, content, those are the same. Whether you're having someone do a picture, build a collage, make a sculpture, or write a paper, right? That's the same. So that part of when you did instruction, you already taught them about that stuff. And that applies no matter what. So when I was an anthropology student back in the day, we had the choice of doing a paper or something else. Okay? So I built a sculpture in a field. It was huge. It was bigger than this room. It cost me hundreds of dollars. I don't know what I was trying to do. Anyway, I built a sculpture, but my professor kept saying, you better make sure that the audience, the purpose, the scope is all still accurate. I should be able to walk in there and tell what it means just from looking at it. And that's the same thing with a movie, with a commercial, with a picture, with a presentation, with a 3D model, with a watercolor, whatever. You should be able to still tell that. Okay? And then what source, this will be maybe a new one, is the source that they chose a good method of communication? Should they have used a paper instead of a sculpture on a farm field? Was this movie as effective as a short play? Was the mime maybe not the best way to communicate? Okay? So is the source the best way? And the great thing about this part is it is not you deciding. You are not the decider here. This is a collaborative process. Because your students are participatory students. They expect and anticipate that their opinion has merit, and they want to be part of this participatory culture. So when we do multimodal, it's a wonderful opportunity for actual dialogue and discussion. It doesn't matter what the topic or the discipline is. Okay? So, and then did they communicate their ideas? Visual images are great communicators of ideas. I'll give you an example. Anybody remember the movie Jaws? How many of you are still a little nervous about the ocean? Right? And everybody knows the theme music. What's the music? Really? What's the music? Da-da-da-da-da, right? So what if Jaws had been a PowerPoint? Slide 1, shark bigger than anticipated. Slide 2, need bigger boat. Not quite the same impact, right? Not quite the same terrifying feel. You don't have to have your students be Spielbergs to communicate in an impactful way and a complicated synthesis of ideas. Maybe even better than the way they would have done it traditionally. So, something to think about. Some other rubrics, do they understand the purpose? Did this 5 minutes movie have anything to do with what you were talking about? Did they organize their information for the audience that they were viewing, that they had? And did the arrangement make sense? If it's a piece of art, does it start and end? Does it tell a story? Does it have a theme? Does it have a motif? If it's a movie, does it have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Okay? I had a student in the digital media studio. I tell the story all the time. I know him, and I told him I was going to tell the story. He works in the writing center. Okay? He's a very gifted filmmaker. Okay? He's a very gifted writer. But he got really hooked on an idea, and he lost focus. And he said, and I walked by one day, and I said, what are you doing on the screen? And he said, this is going to blow your mind. I was like, well, sit down. Blow my mind. It was 3.5 minutes of foot running through the woods. I said, I'm going to throw up. I said, what are you doing? He said, did it blow your mind? I said, no. He said, it didn't? I said, it was a man running through the woods. And he was like, it was the personal search for freedom. It was like all this stuff. And I was like, no, it was a man running through the woods. And he came back the next day and he said, you know what? I kind of lost my scope and my purpose. He said, I was so excited to use the Steadicam that I forgot what it is I was trying to communicate, right? So that's kind of the equivalent of whipping out the synonyms and going crazy with the adjectives, right? So think about your arrangement and think about your form. This kind of rubric is something you would have them do for any kind of composition, right? It's not anything different than what you're telling them to do now. Mostly, right? Here's some other examples. Does the project's form students' content? We talked about that. Is the delivery system robust? I'm going to give you all this, so don't feel like I have to read. Does the project exhibit an understanding of the tools used? Did they choose a technology they probably shouldn't have because they just didn't know it? That's a real life kind of lesson, right? Like, don't buy a do the project creators control the technology, or does the technology, is it gratuitous? Like when PowerPoint started and everybody put like clapping sounds and the railroad, like, is it just random gratuitous stuff, or does it apply to the message? And writing is like that too, right? Do you need to take this sentence out, or do you need to leave it in? Are their decisions deliberate and controlled? These are all criteria that are not, that I don't think you guys are all like, I've never heard of that before, right? You're like, yeah, sure, I got this. Do they understand their potential users? For those who are designing like 3D kind of usable things, does the interface function rhetorically in the project? Does it inform user experience? So these are some example rubrics that you can use when you're talking about project creation. When you're talking about documentation, do they practice self-reflexivity? Do they account for the authorial understanding of the production choices they made? In other words, can they tell you why they chose this over that? And why they chose it, and how does it inform what they do? Do they document their process? Because let me tell you something, if you take a picture with a camera, there's still a great deal of documentation, citation, and research that goes into that. Why did you choose that subject over another subject? How does that subject inform the concept? Where did you take that picture? Did you take that picture? Okay, so images still have a great deal of research that go into them, maybe more so than written word. Because when we talk to our friends about things that have moved us, sometimes it's an article that we read in the newspaper, but oftentimes it's like the Hallmark commercials. I can't watch a Hallmark commercial without bursting into tears. Or the Maxwell House commercials at Christmas time, right? When the guy comes home, that commercial's been on the air for 20 years. Every time I'm like, I gotta call my mom, right? So we know that visual images are moving. We know that those are things that you compile incredibly complex concepts into one very simple sort of image. Academic integrity and openness. Okay, so let's back up. I said that this student that we have now has a sort of slimy hold on ethics. So internet men's, you guys are familiar with those, right? So the students that you have right now do not find any problem at all going online and taking an image and making it their own and changing it and sending it to their friends. They don't have any problem doing that. And I bang my head against the wall on the DMS all the time because I say you can't just take someone else's image. Well, it's online. Or here's my favorite one. Well, I didn't take their image. I took their image and I changed the color of it, and I added a phrase above it, and I changed it and I made it something new. And then I sent it to my friend and he did something else to it. And then he sent it to his friend and he did something else to it. And we threw it all on Tumblr. Women in binders, right? It's a great example of that. Okay, binders full of women. Now, did anybody have the copyright permission to use those binders or those women to make those binders full of women? Probably not. But online, we're very loose with our copyright and our ethical concerns. Your students will be that loose with you in the classroom. So it's a good opportunity to talk about some digital citizenship. Because if we don't talk to them about it, nobody's going to. Just say no. So did the information that they access, did they access it in the correct way? Did they cite it in the correct way? Did they get permissions in the correct way? Did they link to it? Did they do their NLA or APA or whatever your citation formats are? And I provided for you guys, I do have a handout and it's in my office. I'll get it. I provided for you guys how to cite multimodal works, a list of how to do it, all kinds of stuff, everything from a mime performance to a movie, how to cite it. So, because we want them to make sure that they're accountable and have academic integrity. So I've said create a rubric and I've showed you how, so how do we start? In your classroom. For those of you who aren't doing multimodal assignments now, one way to start is use real world examples. Get your kids together and look at pictures, music videos, performances, commercial, posters. Talk about the impact. Look at those and apply the rubrics that you assign to your own projects. Apply those same rubrics to a commercial project. And see if you can identify the performance, the scope, the audience, the whatever, okay? And then from there you can say, now create your own based on this theme, okay? Another thing you can do is take the print assignment that you did and compose a multimodal one now. Take your resume that you just wrote and make an e-portfolio. Take your written paper about Chaucer and make a multimodal. Okay? And then partner with groups on campus. Nothing says cross-discipline like multimodal. So it's a good opportunity to work with the Digital Media Studio, the Writing Center, FITSE, LTITC, other professors who are doing similar things. So other departments who specialize in this. It's a good opportunity to partner with people on campus. And then I talked about that sort of evaluative assessment, the formative assessment. Periodically have peer group sessions so that they can learn from each other too, because we're all self-taught on the software thing. So peer group assessments where they can say, here's where I am in the project, here's where I am, here's what I'm doing, here's how I did it. Let them talk turkey. That's important for that peer learning process. This is all a bajillion of the top kind of blogs that talk about this. I will give you access to this, of course. But what I wanted to do with our last little bit of time was talk about like what concerns y'all had and some concrete suggestions you might need and examples that I know other people have done in other disciplines for using that.
Well, the one thing that I think stands out immediately to me is one of these initial fears that you stated is that I'm playing with the idea of doing a poster presentation instead of a research paper next term for my conflict class. How much time do I devote the time to teaching them how to create a poster, or do I say you have to do a poster presentation, this is what the content and assessment will be like, now you go figure it out?
Well, you provide the scaffolding, absolutely. This is the
yeah, I mean, that gets done anyway,
right.
but.
Yes, exactly. So you would do that part of it no matter what.
Yeah.
There's two different ways I've seen people do this. One, they've done a small mini demonstration as a group in class.
Yeah, I was thinking of like, calling my friends from grad school, saying, send me your posters so I can
Right.
show them what I want.
Right, so there's that. You could do it as a group. remember, this generation is participatory, so they benefit from being able to do it themselves rather than seeing other people's examples. Okay, so there's that. Then the other option that you can do is you can send them to places like on the web that show this group, your students will watch 4 to 6 minute YouTube videos until their eyes fall out. So at 6 minutes they stop, but 4 to 6 minutes worth of web content, they will watch up to 30 6-minute YouTube videos a day on their own. So if there are other people out there doing this and have filmed it, so find it, send them to it. Yeah. And at Baylor, there's somebody who has had great success with that. Send you to the web to learn how to do it, come back and we'll do it together.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm not an open, free open source person. I couldn't care less if they make it whatever things. I don't want to devote time to like teaching it in the office because then they'll get this idea that that's how they have to create it.
Right. The other thing you can do is you can contact the Digital Media Studio, and one of them, it's usually me, but this is my last week at NTSU, so it's a little strange. Yeah, I'm going to the state library, but one of them will come to your class and talk specifically about the 4 or 5 pieces of software they could use for that assignment.
Especially one of the challenges we have is if it's group work, how do you assess individual contributions?
I'll show you if this will move forward for me. I want to show you. There's my JAWS. Okay. Okay, so here's a good way to do this. So in participatory culture, there's affiliations, expressions, collaborative problem solving, and circulation. The students already use all of these in their everyday life. Okay, so affiliations are groups and clubs. Facebook, they're down with affiliations. They're down with groups. Expressions, well, they live to express. Okay, and circulations are like podcasts, whatnot. But collaborative problem-solving tools that already exist online. Here we are. So this is called the participatory fan, and I can send you this if you want. So these are tools that already exist online in the cloud or through download that you can use in your classroom. And some of these are great trackers of group work because it requires the students to put in self-evaluations as they go. They're already doing this kind of stuff on Discuss and on Reddit and on different tools, and you can just adapt these simple tools to your classroom. They track themselves, peer track themselves. And people have had wonderful success with them. One of the best ones is this, well, you can set up a Discuss for your group project. You can also do on the comment and reputation sites, and then on the crowdsourced content as well. Any of those will allow them to self-regulate themselves and provide you with some nice process, look into the expression of the process. So when you start a project, you say document the process as you go on these sites. They're already using these to comment on their favorite videos, the articles they read, the TV shows that they watch. So it's not, it's completely native to them to apply that.
It's sort of an advanced Google Docs so that you tell them you need to do development on this site so I can tell if you've made a contribution.
Yeah.
I can see the log.
Yeah, you could even do it on Google Doc and have it track the comments. Yeah, absolutely. Google Docs is a great way to do that. Google Moderator is a great way to do that because it forces them to be peer accountable. So everything that they write is visible to their peers and they can comment on. And again, this group likes to comment on each other's stuff. So you may have to have some discussions about being nice. That comes back to that digital citizenship again. Online, there's a lot of snark. a lot of anonymous nastiness, you want to make sure that doesn't translate into your classroom and into the real world. And some of them don't know that in the workplace. When they get out, that's not going to be okay. You think they would know that, but they don't. So it's a good opportunity to say all this anonymous nastiness that you see online is not how you get any function in the real world. So let's have some decency rules, some citizenship rules. A lot of professors create blogs and they start off with a contract that says, you know, you're not going to be a jerk online. We're all going to read this, and we're not going to bully each other, and you know, all that stuff.
How much use does B2L get?
All of
Currently.
this.
I mean, currently with the discussion boards and the chat rooms.
Yeah.
It's being used in this classroom.
And anything that we have, any software that we have in the DMS, and anything that I recommend is all B2L friendly. There's a lot more out there that it's not necessarily B2L compliant, though they are working on changing that. I've spoken to the guys from B2L last month, and they are aware of some limitations, and they're working on that. The biggest limitation you'll have with students creating multimedia projects is the size of the project could be difficult. You aren't going to be able to necessarily get them to email that to you, for example, unless they compress it first. But again, if you call over to the DMS and say, what do I need to tell them, we'll say, make sure they compress it using X program, or make sure that they throw it up on a YouTube channel or a Vimeo channel, and they make it private and then send you the link, and then they don't have to worry about that. Because their SkyDrive is quite large, but yours is not. Because you don't have it. So you're getting access to those large multimedia projects.
One of the things I've observed, like in a project, if several students are working, some of them might be good at something, others. So if there is a variation and there's strengths, is there any tool that can help us assess different things? Not necessarily one being weak on one, but just to get a view of the strengths of like multi-intelligences.
Yes, and okay. Yes, absolutely. So there are a couple of assessment tools that exist out there where you can do like, hello, welcome to the semester, let's figure out where we all are kind of assessments that you can do, and I can send you those if you want. Duke University has a bunch of them online that are available for you, but we also have some stuff in the library that you can access on that. But the other thing is, it doesn't necessarily matter what their skill level is, because if you let them choose whatever product works for their skill level, then you can focus on the rubric criteria that you taught to, versus trying to judge whether or not the quality of their movie making skills necessarily. Because then if they can pick a product that works for their skill level, or a project that works for their skill level. In other words, somebody who's not very computer friendly, and we have a lot of students on this campus who are not computer conversant at all, especially non-traditionals. Building a movie might not going to be their best option. A poster may be a better option for them, or a diorama, or a watercolor, or whatever. So, they have them pick their strength, for sure.
So isn't like creating a rubric or an assessment tool for that kind of assessment?
No, the ones that I gave you, I've given you 15 different ones that you can steal them. But you'll find they're very similar to the rubrics that you're using already. Very similar. The additional thing you need to make sure is, does the tool match? Is it the best tool that they could have chosen to get across the message? Yeah. And if you want to know what all the multimedia options in the universe are for your students, because sometimes we just get locked in that sort of, there's blogs, there's presentations, there's movies, what else is there? I could stand up here all day for the rest of the day telling you about them, but there is if you Google multimodal inventory, and I'll send you guys the link to that when I send you the presentation. It has a list of 300 different kinds of things they can do. So you just show them and say, pick one. Yeah, they'll have their preferences. I mean, I've seen. So I saw a class where they did, one girl did a watercolor, one student did a movie, one student did a prezi, one student did a diorama, and one student did a cross stitch, and another person did a poem. And all of them were very effective at getting across. It was a kind of an in-depth book report critique project, and they did a very good job of getting across the core message of the book in all those different ways. So those are all multimodal, and not all of them involve electricity. So I mean, you just have to, what is it that you want them to know?
I have one suggestion that I didn't see in your list that I think would be great to add. You might have been it by poster, but infographics.
Yes, infographics are huge, and in the DMS we have a list of the top 6 infographics sites that they can use. The problem with infographics is that they need to pare down their message to the very core. So if that's what you want to know, make sure that they know is the core basics of something, then that's perfect. But if you're wanting them to expound on something, then obviously an infographic is actually the best. Infographics also have a lot of pre-made templates, and there's a lot of infographics that have already been done by college students out on the web, and Turnitin ain't going to find that for you, so be very careful. I found that out the hard way. So I helped teach a class on infographics, and the students were very honest with me. They said, look, I found all these already done. I didn't have to necessarily do any of these on a variety of topics, so that was a lesson for me. It's much harder to plagiarize a movie than it is an infographic. Infographics. I will show you. Yeah. We actually have a watercolor program in the DMS. They can just do it. So let's see. Here we go. So visually is like the main one. Okay, let's look at an animal one. So this is an infographic where they take several concepts, and there we are, and they put it into a graphical interface, so you can see that this is right. It is, yeah. Very, very big right now. Newspapers love them. So this is an infographic of the oceans. In order to get to these advanced infographics, you have to have accounts, paid accounts. A lot of the basic infographic sites will not do all of this. But these are all freely available, so they don't have to recreate them. Because once they're done, all the infographic sites out there store the infographics on their own website. They don't allow you to store them on your own website, and so they become public property of the company. So that's why whenever you search, you can find an infographic on anything. What's also great about infographics is it's good for data, and infographics are very data-driven, so they will pull from external data sites and import into yours. So like I do infographics on our Facebook account in the library. It's all, I don't put any information in by myself. It pulls it all from my Facebook account, the library's Facebook account, and generates it. So, I mean, it's a very data kind of specific pared down tool.
Are there any tools that you could recommend for foreign languages?
As far as what? What's your objective?
Well, I teach Japanese, and my goal, of course, is for students to be able to perform the language.
Right.
Performance is a huge part. So I use a lot of role plays in class, and that's all like paper pencil kind of assessment, and I do peer evaluations as well. So recently I've started something on the wiki spaces, like a group project that they do on the wiki, and then I've been making some changes to my rubrics as well to that. So anything that you might be aware of that maybe the foreign language teachers use already?
I don't know about the foreign language teachers here. I do know that there's and I'll send it to you. Remind me. There is a website out there for English language learners, and the whole concept of the website is they go on walks, and everything that they come across, they have dialogue with. It's a very simple concept, but it makes them demonstrate the language because it's not just this is a chair, but it's them in relationship to the chair, so then you get into some more complex language sort of interactions. You know, they go up to the pizza guy and they get a slice of pizza. So, I mean, something like that would be a very simple project for them to do and really force them to demonstrate use. And pretty easy for you to do that. Was this helpful? Okay. Like I said, I'll send you all those rubrics so that you don't have to try and, you know, you can hummingbird them, save them for later when you're ready to skim them. I'll also send you guys those citations, how to cite multimedia assignments, information as well. That's all I have. If you have any other questions, if not, you're free. Go eat. Thank you.